Welcome aboard the Athletics Can't Wait Jets podcast, your nonstop shop for all things Jets with Tim McMaster, Zack Rosenblatt, and Marissa Dunn.
Can't wait!
The Zach Wilson era may be over in New York. He's officially out Friday against the Dolphins. Tim Boyle will get the start. Has the 2023 Jets season hit rock bottom? We'll discuss both of those things and much more on this episode of the Can't Wait podcast. Tim McMaster here, along with Zack Rosenblatt, our Jets reporter at The Athletic. Thanks for checking out the show. You know, it's the giving time of year, Zack. So I want to propose to the listeners out there. Well, hit the like button as always, but on Apple, give us a nice review this time of year, right? Like, I think because listeners have put up with the season, put up with us through this season, we should do a listener appreciation episode towards the end of the season, where basically the best reviews for the show from here till then, we'll read them. Maybe we'll have a couple people on that give us nice reviews as well. What do you think, Zack?
Yeah, I love it. You know,
I think we need to give back. But in order
yeah.
to give back, you need to give us something.
Yeah, and we should and maybe we can even do it like if we get a certain number of views, whoever is like the X review, like we can give them like a can't wait swag or something. Like just have some fun.
Yes,
with it,
but I have them on. What the heck? Come on and
have them on, all the good stuff. So yeah, well, so start writing some reviews, guys, and we're gonna do a show where we read all of them and see. We got some lovers of the idea. And then soon enough, Marissa will be back. So all the people who hate on us, like the guy who just commented, Marissa will be back. And the podcast will be
throw this one up too.
You know, it's
thanks, Max.
Thanks, Max.
Says
appreciate
this
you
podcast
listening.
Sucks without Connor. We love you.
We love you too, Max. We love our haters as much as we love the people who love us. But anyway, that Marissa will add a boost to the podcast like Mike White did to the offense last year. Is what I would say.
And Tim Boyle will on Friday, right?
We're about to find out. Yeah.
All right, let's get into it. It was obviously painful to watch on Sunday. We appreciate everybody tuning in and listening to more talk about this. But the big news today is that Tim Boyle will start on Black Friday against the Dolphins. What a well-named game, I guess, at this point, Zack. But he'll be there for all eyes to see again, because this team just keeps getting featured on television because of Aaron Rodgers, even though there's no Aaron Rodgers. It'll be Tim Boyle. Robert Saleh talked about it today in his press conference. Didn't really share a whole lot. Said he liked that Boyle was decisive in the game, kind of excused him for the interception of like forcing it too late. Your thoughts on Tim Boyle finally replacing Zach Wilson as the starter for this team?
Yeah, I mean, it felt the way Sunday's game went about as badly as it could have, and that's kind of what I thought it would take for them to finally pull the trigger. I'm not surprised, but it is just like we're like, it's the deja vu is just like it's giving me a headache is what I would say. Like the amount of like similarities to last year. I'd say there's less of a rallying cry for like Mike White, because Mike, that was a unique spot because he obviously had that game the year before against the Bengals where he became like
Mike effing White.
A cult hero here because of that crazy game he had. But it just feels like, again, and you know, the defense played poorly the other day, but it's you know, eventually, as I wrote in my story, like eventually the straw was going to break the camel's back. Like they weren't going to be able to carry this team in the way that they were the entire time, and they absolutely deserve criticism for the way they played. And I think everybody knows that what Robert Saleh said about dominating quarterbacks earlier in the year, and I very confidently can say that probably made its way back to the Bills locker room and Josh Allen, and that's why they were maybe talking a little more smack the other day. Like the Jets like didn't really, I don't know, they could have handled it some better after some wins, as we've talked about. But anyway, like it felt like another season is being wasted, and the tumbling was starting earlier this year than it did last year. They started 6-3 last year. They were 4-3, and they've lost since. And it's just they had to do it. Like there's like a surprisingly large contingent of people who keep wanting to say it's not Zach's fault. Like, stop blaming him, and it's not his fault. Everything is not his fault, but he's at the top of it. He's been bad. He's been one of the worst in terms of production quarterbacks that the league has arguably ever seen, or at the very least in the last decade. And he was at his worst on Sunday. He was missing guys. Like the interception he had was really, really bad. It felt like they were I thought maybe they would go away from him right then. They wound up scoring. I can't remember when the Breece Hall touchdown was, but they scored on a drive that they got helped a little bit by roughing the passer penalty on that drive. But the offense, again,
and they had the best play of the game, which was the fake punt.
Oh yeah. So Brandon Eccles had 18 receiving yards. I saw somebody
and Thomas Morstead was the best quarterback in that game, arguably.
Yeah, right? I was gonna say I saw somebody tweeted. I didn't look at the PFF grades today, but that Thomas Morstead and Brandon Eccles were their highest rated offensive players.
But one for 18.
But yeah, like the offense is just going nowhere, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that, and we'll get into all of them. Offensive play calling, the offensive line, the running game is really just like shot right now. Breece Hall has not been playing quite as well, although the blocking hasn't been great in front of him. The receivers were an absolute disaster, but Zach Wilson didn't complete a pass to a wide receiver. Like that seems impossible, and if you play enough, like in the modern NFL. And the receivers aren't helping. There are drops. They had this youth movement that was supposed to do something. If anything, it made things worse. And Izzy Abanikanda didn't really play an offense until late. But anyway, so Zach Wilson's bench because this is literally, and this is an exaggeration, the worst third down offense in recorded NFL history. So at least since the 1970s, like this is the worst third down offense. If they were to end the season with their current percentage. And again, it's not all the quarterback, sure. Like I can acknowledge that for you, but the quarterback is supposed to help these issues. Like the quarterback is supposed to be able to change the protections at the line and shade it to a certain direction and double a guy if it seems like they're going to blitz and Zach Wilson just doesn't see these things. And, there's no threat of him passing the ball. So the defense loads the box. And so there's nowhere for Breece to go. And Breece is not a guy who's going to get he's not going to break a bunch of tackles on his way to like a big run. A lot of it is him running and hitting the holes hard and scoring on like long runs and long plays. And so he hasn't had chances for those. And as bad as the offensive line is, you look across New York and you look at, or in Landover, I should say, and you look at what the Giants just did with Tommy DeVito the other day. Tommy DeVito, who had negative passing yards against the Jets cumulatively, had 3 touchdowns and 0 interceptions, which Zach Wilson has never done. 3 touchdowns he's never done. They did it with a worse offensive line, I would argue. I saw a tweet from Jordan Renaud from ESPN about like 2 of their starters are guys that weren't on the team like a couple weeks ago, and they managed to figure it out. Like you figure it out around what you have. Like you're not the first team to ever have an offensive line that's banged up. Obviously, it's debilitating, and I don't think this is going to be a good offense because of it. But like you're not the first team to ever lose players. You're not the first team to ever have receivers who aren't playing up to their snuff. You do have Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, which a lot of teams don't. And so something had to change. And Robert Saleh has been big on like it's not going to be one person, but Zach Wilson is a quarterback, and I don't know if Tim Boyle is the answer, but I do believe that you had to change and see if he can give you something more. And if he doesn't, then you give Trevor Siemian a shot. If that doesn't work, then by then the season is almost over anyway. And that's kind of the sad state of affairs we're in. You hope that Tim Boyle we'll get into like what I think about him as like a quarterback and all that stuff. But whatever you think about him, like if they can tread water and the dream of Aaron Rodgers coming back is still there, then you have something to play for in that way. But I think ultimately, the goal now is just get through this season without the locker room, combusting. And I think benching Zach Wilson's a big part of that. So you get through the season, you get to next year, you hope that Woody Johnson is patient with the coaches and Joe Douglas and then you roll with Aaron Rodgers next year and the dreams that you had this last year, and you plan a little better with your backup quarterback than you did this time. But it was long past overdue. You wonder if it was too little, too late. But if Tim Boyle can provide a spark, like they're still technically in it, obviously, like the AFC is wide open. There's an extra wild card. Hypothetically,
they're off the screen yesterday though on TV when they show like the division leaders, the wild cards, and other teams. They're officially not in the other team section, which is never a good place to be.
It's a tough spot. Like this is like, it's hard to say a new low because the Jets have had a lot of lows in the organizational history, but this offense has just been an absolute embarrassment. Like, and it's hard to watch, and it's unfortunate. Like I get fans in my mentions, and I know I can be sassy, so I get why some fans get frustrated with that. I had somebody literally tweeted at me. He's like, can you ever not be a sassy bitch? And my response was, no, I cannot ever stop being that. But like when a team's bad, I'm going to tweet out like observations that I find interesting. And a lot of times that's really bad stats about the quarterback or how they're historically bad offense or Nathaniel Hackett's not doing his job. And when they're good, I do the opposite. Like I more than even anybody on the speed, in my opinion, tweet out like the positive stats, the PFF grades that are good, like all that stuff. I try and show both sides of it. Right now, there's not really much good to tweet about, and there's not really much good to write about. Like this is a disaster of the team's own creation in a lot of ways. They've had some bad luck, but they made the bed with Aaron Rodgers and they've had to sleep in it, and the guys that he wanted them to sign have not been good. So anyway, this is all a long discussion about the Zach Wilson part of it, but they had to do it. I expected them to either cut him or make him the third string quarterback. They're going with third string, and we're back where we were last year, and we'll see what Tim Boyle has. Like, he doesn't have a history of production, but we'll get into him next, I'm sure.
Yeah, before we get back to Boyle, as far as Zack goes, it's interesting what they're doing with him. There was speculation, I think, that this team could not just bench Zack, but just flat out get rid of him at this point. Just cut their losses and release Zack and let him see where he lands. The Jets aren't doing that. And when asked what would happen with Zack's future, Saleh, in fact, put it off to the offseason. He said, we'll figure that out in the offseason. So Zack is going to be a part of this team for the rest of the season. But not only is he going to be part of the team for the rest of the season, Zack, but he's going to be in uniform on Friday, not as the backup, but Saleh saying that they will have, he didn't say active, but he said all three quarterbacks will be up, which probably means an emergency situation. But I'm a little surprised by that, but that Zack's going to be in uniform on the sideline for this team on Friday.
Yeah, so Saleh didn't specify very well, and I'm sure we'll fall because we're actually going to be talking to him 3 days in a row because the schedule is different because of the Friday game. So we're going to be talking to him tomorrow, actually.
I'm sure he's very excited about that.
Yeah. And then we'll talk to him again on Saturday, I believe. So probably most we'll talk to him and after the game Friday. So a lot of talking with Saleh this week, just not on Thanksgiving. We're giving him Thanksgiving off. But yeah, my feeling is he didn't specify what he meant because it doesn't really make any sense whatsoever to have all three of them active on game day. Like there's no reason to have three unless one of them's Taysom Hill and you're going to do like some of those packages. Like the Saints have three quarterbacks, I guess technically, but you're not going to do that with Zack. So I think what he meant was he'll be like the emergency third, which the new rule is they just have to be on the active roster. Like he doesn't have to be active.
They do take up a spot though on the roster.
They take a spot on the 53. But you don't have to keep him at like he can be a healthy scratch on Sunday, but still be in uniform in case both Tim Boyle and Trevor Siemian got injured is the idea.
Now they would have to be injured too, right? Not just
you can't just like it can't be poor performance. Yeah, it has to be injury. Right. So there's no world where he plays unless you're making him a holder or something. Like I don't really know what purpose that would serve. So yeah, he's bumping all the way down the third string, I would say. And I will say that's it's not surprising, and everybody knows that they're done with Zack at this point. But last year, if you remember, like when he benched him, he's like, we still think Zack has a future with us, and everybody knew it felt like kind of BS. They kept rolling with it. They brought him back this offseason. They didn't have to do that. But now he's like pushing it to the offseason because I think everybody knows in the offseason is when they're finally going to part ways. They technically have to make a decision on his 5th-year option in May, I believe. I think that might be the easiest decision they've ever made if he's even on the team still at that point, which he probably won't be. But yeah, to your original part of this topic, like I did kind of, there had been rumblings or whatever that if they were to bench him, they might just full on cut ties with him and kind of everybody goes their separate ways. It's kind of like to a different scale, like the Michael Carter thing where they just figured there was no point of keeping him around inactive. They might as well let him go and find somewhere else to play. I kind of thought they might do that with Zack, though I understand why some in the organization probably did not want to do that. So they're going to roll with him still here. I think he's much more mature than he was last year. I think he handled yesterday pretty well. He even said, he's like, it was frustrating that he was benched, but he understood why. And so I think he's a good teammate now. And not that he wasn't last year, but I think it's a different kind of teammate he is now. He'll be supportive of Tim Boyle and Trevor. And I don't think he'll be a distraction in the way that maybe you would think, but he's still in there. And I just think everybody at this point knows that it'll be best for both organization and person / player to just go their separate ways. And Zack will probably, maybe he'll be better somewhere else where he's out of this limelight. You hope he goes somewhere that's a little more low key or where he can be a backup or a third string. And I'm very curious to see what the future holds for him. In terms of wherever, in terms of a team like takes a flyer on him or puts him on the practice squad or whatever, like, but I do think he's going to be in the NFL, and I don't think he'll be like out of the league anytime soon, but I don't think he's going to be a starter, obviously.
Wherever he goes next, he's no longer the number 2 pick that you put your franchise on the line for,
Yes.
right? That's just the past. Like, they'll know he was a number 2 pick, but he's not your number 2 pick wherever he goes, which is a huge huge difference from a fan base perspective. I don't think it really matters to the team. Although one reason to not cut him, I will say, is you're thinking about Joe Douglas releasing the quarterback you took number 2 overall before the end of his 3rd season is a horrible look. And I don't care how great the 2022 draft class is. It doesn't cover that up.
Yeah. And, I'm sure there also are cap considerations. Like I'm looking at his contract now. Some of it's prorated because they're later in the season. So they probably would lose a little bit of money if they technically cut him right now. So I get it to a degree. In the offseason, they won't really save any money by cutting him. I think they would by trading him. You'll take a big dead cap hit, but you just kind of take that on the chin and just accept that you have to move on from. Like, according to Over the Cap, even if it's a post June 1 cut, they save $0. So, maybe you hope that somebody will just trade like a late pick for him, but I don't know. It's the end of the Zach Wilson era. We said it was last year, and it was. And I think they showed their hand, as you've said. They showed their hand last year how they felt about him. They benched him twice. Benched him for Chris Streveler, which we supported, but benched him for a practice squad quarterback in a game with playoff implications. They were openly pursuing other quarterbacks, his teammates and the team, Derek Carr and Aaron Rodgers and others that they explored. They brought Aaron Rodgers in, and it was they were open about how we do not intend to play him at all this year. That is the goal, that we don't have to play him. And then,
but then they went against that in theory in not getting another quarterback to back up Aaron Rodgers, right?
Yep. Saul said something today, and I wasn't able to be on the presser, as some of you guys probably know if you follow me on Twitter. I had some flight issues, so but he said something along the lines of Zach never got the chance to sit back and watch a veteran, and I'm like, well, I mean, that's kind of on you guys. Ultimately, you should have done that his rookie year, certainly, and honestly, probably should have done that this year when Aaron went down, even after that. So
yeah, he could have been the 3rd string guy and could have had another, just a veteran in there somehow. So Aaron Rodgers goes down. Maybe it was Aaron Rodgers going down in the 4th game. You still wouldn't want to turn.
There's no guarantee he would have played 17 games. Yeah.
Yeah. And
he's going to be 40 years old.
Yeah. In an impossible position where they had to go back on base. You said it. They showed last year that they weren't interested in this kid. And then they did everything to set themselves up to be back in the same position.
Yeah. The Jets have, and I think they've been like this for a long time. The best organizations are proactive and not reactive. And the Jets are a very reactive organization. It doesn't think like Howie Roseman, it seems like he's thinking 3 steps ahead of time. Like he signs, he does things like sign young guys to cheaper contracts before they blow up, and then they blow up, and all of a sudden you have a guy in a great deal.
Drafted Jalen Hurts when he already had a quarterback.
Drafted Jalen Hurts, that's a great example. He's just thinking about, okay, and I think Joe Douglas was almost playing too fast and loose with that idea when he drafted Will McDonald, because he's like, all right, well, let's see what, Bryce Huff, free agents coming year, we're going to be done with Carl Lawson, and Will McDonald can be a star in 2 years, and we don't need to worry about him yet. Well, that backfired because they could have had one of the receivers who, by all accounts, they graded all these guys as 2nd-round picks, and that has backfired because Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison in particular look very good, and I think JSN has started to really pick up in Seattle. So, so a lot of mistakes were made. I think the construction of this, as I wrote my story last night, you can point the finger at the 4 heads in the most key positions of the organization outside of owner, and that's general manager Joe Douglas, who built this offense into a group that doesn't look like these guys should even be in the NFL, half of them, and a lot of these guys are getting paid money, and they can say they don't. I think these guys can make excuses all they want, but this is the guys they picked at wide receiver in particular, CJ Uzomah, even some of these offensive linemen. These are the guys they picked, and it's not working out. So that falls on the GM, the coach. This team does not seem like they're ready every week. They're undisciplined on offense, and Robert Saleh can say it's not one thing. Well, as I've said before, if it's not one thing, then it's everything. Then that's on you, the coach, to pull it all together. And the best coaches make the most out of what they have, whether you believe in the talent that you have or not. They make the most out of what they have. Even Kyle Shanahan is as good at that as anybody, and that's Robert Saleh's mentor. You look at the best coaches in the league, they get the the most out of the least. And I get it's not easy, but the job's not supposed to be easy. That's why only 32 have the job. So Robert Saleh is the next one. And then you have Nathaniel Hackett running this offense. It gets more and more boring every week. He seems like he's scared to do anything. Going up to the booth, which he did for the first time, to sit next to Todd Downing, and so they could have more collaborative process or whatever the reason was. It didn't do anything. That was as bland and boring as an offensive play calling I've seen. I don't think he put those guys in position to succeed. And that's the thing I go back to. Like I saw somebody posted Bobby Skinner, who does the Talking Giants podcast. He had a video of a Giants play that didn't work out, but like the routes were done in a way that basically like spurred these guys open, and Tommy DeVito just didn't see them. Like if these routes were getting guys open and Zack was missing them, that would also be like, okay, then it's clearly only on the quarterback. But I don't really see a lot of plays where that's happening, and there's a lot of running up the middle on second and long where everybody knows it's coming, and there's just no creativity. The creativity comes on special teams with Brant Boyer more than it does with Hackett. So I think Hackett absolutely deserves blame, even if the Jets have pushed back on that. And then it's Zach Wilson, the quarterback, and I think we've said everything we had to say about him. But the four horsemen of the Jets have failed to do their jobs adequately, and that's why we're where we're at.
All right, back to Boyle. I'd love your thoughts, because you've seen as much of him as anybody, right? Like through training camp and practice. And I know you were impressed in training camp. So really, what can we expect from this guy? He's not as athletic as Zach Wilson, which could be a problem with this offensive line. But what do you expect from him on Friday?
The biggest thing with Tim, and he even said this in his post-game press conference, and it's kind of the word that a lot of guys have been using when you ask about him. It's decisiveness. Like I don't know. I haven't watched enough of Tim Boyle football, even in training camp, because the third string guys don't get as many reps, and Chris Trevler was actually still there. So him and Chris Trevler were actually splitting a lot of the third string reps, but he's really quick at getting rid of the ball. He's decisive. If you look at his time to throw in the preseason, it was like a little over 2 seconds. He threw it pretty quickly last night too. And there's the IQ and the understanding of the offense part of it, where I think he can be at the line of scrimmage and he can make the changes that I was talking about earlier that maybe Zach's not making with the offensive line, with changing routes, whatever it is. I think he has the smarts to be able to run this offense. Does he have the throwing capability? I think that's what we're going to find out. But if the Jets are looking for a game manager, I think Tim Boyle can be that. He doesn't have a rich track record of like success, like college or NFL. Like his numbers in college are kind of crazy. If you look at them, he's had more interceptions than touchdowns in his college career. Barely played at UConn. Played at Eastern Kentucky and had like 10 touchdowns and 13 picks. But he's been in the NFL for like 6 years now, which is like just a remarkable like story for an undrafted kid. But yeah, I'm curious to see what he has. I think the Jets, as with Mike White last year, I imagine the play calling, they probably feel like they can open the playbook up a little more and maybe do what they had intended to do. But yeah, I'm not like, I don't think the Jets are going to go and score 30 points this week, but I think they'll be in better position to make plays. I don't know if Boyle can make all the throws or how he looks throwing the ball downfield and stuff like that, but he's quick at getting rid of the ball, which to his point last night, like is crucial with this offensive line. And a big part of an offensive line struggling is you need the quarterback who can get rid of the ball quickly. And too often Zach holds on to it too long, or, scrambles around, runs around, nothing happens, whatever it is. So the decisiveness will be an improvement, and I'm curious to see how much of an effect that has. And if he can get the ball quickly to Garrett or to Brees, who was finally involved in the passing game, like if he can get them the ball quickly, how much of a difference that makes. And maybe he can be a guy that can get Allen Lazard playing more like a $44 million receiver, because they have some experience together from Green Bay. So because Allen Lazard's been like just a lost cause this season. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to be interested to see what Tim looks like. Trevor obviously is the other option. I think we've seen a lot more tape of him. He's not a guy, again, that's going to make like all the throws, but he can be a solid game managing quarterback. He's had some success in the league. He's not like terribly accurate if you look at his completion percentage, but I think a lot of fans have been calling for him to be the guy that plays. If he was outperforming Tim Boyle in practice to a degree that they felt that was the right move, I think they would have done that. So it wouldn't shock me if we saw Trevor Siemian at some point this season, but I think they're going to give Tim Boyle a chance here.
Do you think, considering everything you just said about Boyle being able to make decisions at the line, change plays, do a lot of the things that Aaron Rodgers would naturally be doing, Do you think Hackett would have preferred this to happen a lot sooner? Like, is this decision, was it like Hackett's been pining for Tim Boyle and Robert Saleh just wouldn't make the move on Zach Wilson? Or do you think he's just, I don't know, lack of a better word, lost either way?
It's an interesting question.
It's not very kind to Hackett, but
no. I mean, it's a fair question. Without having like heard this directly from him, like I think it would be fair to say that he has felt limited by Zack in his play calling, and I think you see that in the way that he calls plays scared, and that's why I think.
Well, a year ago, sorry to cut him. A year ago, that's
yeah.
exactly what happened with LaFleur, right?
Yeah,
but you
totally.
could tell LaFleur wanted Mike White.
Opened up the playbook. Yeah, like you could just see it from the play calling, no matter what he said publicly. And then as I reported, he was pretty open behind the scenes that he didn't like Zack. But yeah, so I think you'll probably see something similar in terms of the play, or you would hope. Like I mean, it's all theoretical. Like we haven't seen Nathaniel Hackett do anything but what we've seen from him so far. Like LaFleur showed some creativity even with Zach Wilson at times. I haven't seen any of that at all this season. It's been honestly like just terrible. So if he doesn't open it up for Tim Boyle, like I don't have any belief that this offense is going to get any better. So that's going to be one of the biggest storylines on Friday. I keep trying to say like Sunday, and I keep forgetting that we're on the first ever Friday game, which is so weird.
And that's brutal too, is making this change
short
week. Yeah.
Yeah, which is why they had to make the decision today. They couldn't let it linger. They're not even going to have like a full practice, or maybe tomorrow they will. That'll be their only practice of the week. So short week. You hope that Tim Boyle can handle it. Got a few reps at the end of that game when it was already out of hand. I don't think I would put a lot of stock into what we saw at the end of the game. The interception was on like a fourth down. He was just trying to make a play, which we've seen Zack not do that, where he like took a sack on fourth down. So yeah, we'll see. I just there's a lot of, somebody just pointed out Sean Tompkins just pointed out you didn't like Garrett Wilson throwing with a hurt elbow. We didn't get a chance to talk about that because Garrett talked on Friday, but Garrett hurt his elbow last week. And then he had that terrible trick play where he missed Allen Lazard badly. And then I asked Garrett, like, was it bothering you on that throw? And he said, yeah, it was, to be honest with you. Like, he couldn't even hide it. So, and Garrett, to his credit, did not have a great game. He fumbled away. It was a Tim Boyle pass, actually. He fumbled it away.
Yep. Yeah, because it was to a receiver and it was a completion.
Yeah, he took accountability for it. He took accountability for it. But yeah, he needs to be better to a degree. But I keep going back to, you can't blame Garrett Wilson for what's been going on. I'm sorry. He's not even on the top 5 of the list. So so we're gonna find out what Tim Boyle is made of. Certainly, I think Dolphins defense has gotten a lot better since Jalen Ramsey came back. Like Jalen Ramsey is I think he had 2 picks in their last game, helped them win. They have some pass rushers. Like, it's not going to be an easy task by any means, especially if the defense is starting to fall back a little bit. This is not the offense to have a fallback game, because they will kill you. But yeah, I don't know. It's going to be, the Hackett Boyle dynamic is going to be fascinating, because they're going to be running out of excuses for Hackett if he can't figure it out with him. I'm not to say that he has like the whole playbook, or Tim Boyle can do a lot, but like this is a guy that you coached for 3 years in Green Bay. Like, if you can't come up with a better game plan for him than you did for Zack, then it's never going to get better.
Exactly. The defense was bad. Also, we're not blaming this season on the defense by any stretch, but we can partially blame Sunday on the defense, because they got beat. They admitted it after the game that they got beat up and down the field by Josh Allen. And it seemed like Saleh was asked after the game about the effort, and he said, these guys are young kids make mistakes. They're professional football players too. Yeah. But the defense, at the top, you said like the straw that breaks the camel's back. Do you think that's what it was? Like, all these weeks of all this pressure, and then like you come out in this game and you're supposed to start with the ball, and Gibson fumbles the opening kickoff, and suddenly you're defending and you stop them right there. You hold them to a field goal, but then like both halves, the Bills are basically starting with the ball. It just, does it feel like it was just too much finally, and you can't play at that level every week all season?
Yeah, that is what I think. I mean, they were doing stuff that they haven't been doing. Like, they gave up a huge play, that the Khalil Shakir touchdown. Looked like Sauce got beat. Sauce had some words for people who felt that way. He sent a tweet, I think, last night.
Always does.
He always does, and then he deletes it. Like I don't know. I'm sure at some point they talked to him about it. I don't know, but it's funny to me because he just like can't help but speak his mind.
Yeah.
And
No, I
nothing bothers
appreciate it. I'm not criticizing him.
nothing bothers Haas more than like somebody in his mind incorrectly assigning like a catch or a touchdown to him. I don't know if it was a great look in all things considered that he did it at this time, but yeah.
Right.
Anyway, like so they had some plays like that, like some miscommunication stuff on the back end that they hadn't done in a while. Tony Adams got hurt for a little bit. He like messed his finger up and then he came back in. And the pass rush wasn't as prevalent, although Quinn and Williams finally got a sack. Yeah, ultimately, it's just like it wasn't their day. They weren't having as good of a day, and the run defense continues to be a problem. Like that was a problem when they were playing well, but you kind of like are okay with that if it's counteracted by you not giving up any big plays in the passing game. And Josh Allen looked like the Josh Allen that is at his best, which he has never been against the Jets. And you kind of had a feeling it would be a get right game for them this week with the firing in the OC and stuff, but like I wasn't sure. Like the Bills have some weird vibes this season, so it could have gone either way. But Josh Allen had their number, and they need to regroup. And they have a quarterback in Tua that, I think he has his ups and downs. But Tua is, if you give Tua a window, he's going to hit it. Like that dude is accurate as crap. And so, and they have Tyreek Hill, who's practically unstoppable. He seems better than ever. I think he was banged up when they played him last year, but he is just he's one of the more fun NFL players to watch I can remember. Like it just seems like he's a threat to catch. He can be in a sea of defenders, and that dude just runs by everybody. I've never seen anything like it. But
he was almost a Jet.
Yeah, that's one of those almost Jets of all time. Yeah, so they have a really tough task in front of them, but I'm not worried about the defense yet. If they go and get killed by the Dolphins, then I'm going to start getting worried that it's going to start tumbling. But I think Jeff Ulbrich is a good coach for all the criticism we give the offensive side of the ball. I think Ulbrich has done a great job with this defense, and curious to see what he has up his sleeve on Friday.
Speaking of the defense, after the game, there was a little scuffle. I don't know what you want to call it. Skirmish. Deion Dawkins and Clemens. Dawkins said that the Jets were disrespectful, and that's what kind of led to it. I think a lot was made out of it just because there was cameras and phones that saw it. Otherwise, it was mostly a bunch of people trying to break those two guys up. But it does show the frustration on the Jets defensive side, I think.
Yeah, it was Michael Clemens. I will say he does seem to run pretty hot and cold. And I don't think he's played particularly well recently. So don't know if it was a great look that he got into it with Deion Dawkins, who it seems like was jawing the whole game. And he had that whole flop thing that happened during the game where he kind of like rolled around and was like way over the top. But that they punched the Jets in the mouth, and the Jets didn't really know what to do with themselves. And it's like such a unique, that stadium is so old. And so the tunnel, like they both have to go down the same tunnel to go to their locker room. So both locker rooms are like right across from each other. Like DJ Reed was like, I felt like it was inevitable that something was going to happen. Like that's crazy that in the modern NFL that you have two teams going with it, when the emotions are high going down there. And it's just crazy because most of the Jets beat like went down early just to like, because the game was already out of hand. And so it was a good game to like be outside the locker room, especially because of the setup. You can see them going in. And we're standing there. Zach Wilson's like the first one in, and all of a sudden you hear all this commotion. Security guard starts yelling at us to like not get any closer. Rich Samini, you can actually see some of it on Samini's video that he posted. So there's just like young security guard who thinks he's hot shit and a little power hungry. Like all of us we're standing where we're supposed to, and he's like throwing his hands up trying to block our video. And so Samini like yells at him, and all of a sudden we're all yelling at him. It's like Samini rallied the troops, like, but I like Samini was like right behind my ear right here, and he was so mad. I was like, oh my god. Because I'm sure he's dealt with that in his career where these security guards like just get for whatever reason think they have all this power, and there's no reason for him to be doing that. But anyway, we couldn't see all of it, and then a video came out on Twitter after. It was pretty much Michael Clemens having to be held back from Deion Dawkins. Yep. And as Clemens was going to the locker room, you could see coaches calming him down, and then some reporters approached him in the locker room to see if he was willing to comment, and he's kind of walked out without saying anything. So I would say just when stuff like that happens amid like a season where things are kind of falling apart, it's not a great look. I think it gets emphasized a little more. I don't ultimately think it's a huge deal, but if those kind of things keep happening, if they keep being undisciplined, getting all these bad penalties, then you start worrying about it. But I do think Clemens needs to kind of pull back a little. I know his whole thing is going balls to the wall, but he's had some bad penalties this year too. So I would say just go to the locker room after the game.
All right. So Saleh today said, when asked about drafting Zach Wilson, and I know you weren't at the presser, Zach, but he said, I have thoughts on that I've shared with Joe, but I'm not going to get into it today right here, which is a really weird answer. And people are jumping on that answer. It's even in the chat, plenty of talk in the chat right now on this stream about the fact that it's just showing of the disconnect maybe between this head coach and this general manager, which we haven't really, I don't think we've really thought much about in the past because they've always seemed to be kind of locked in and in heading in the same direction. But he made it sound like maybe he didn't want to draft Zach Wilson and Joe did, but it's also possible that he just really answered the question terribly. So knowing Saleh, the way you do, being in all these press conferences day after day, do you think that was just a bad way of answering it? Or do you think there's like something to this?
I think it's a little bit of everything is what I would say. Like everything you just, I know for a fact that there were some in the organization that preferred to keep Sam Darnold and to trade that pick for like a bag of assets, which is what like they could have gotten the 49ers package for Trey Lance in theory. Like I know there are people that felt that way, but I also know that, I don't think anybody was staunchly against drafting Zach Wilson. So if you start seeing stuff coming out, if this thing goes even worse, like to people protecting their asses, like I do think it was an organizational decision to draft Zach Wilson. Joe Douglas ultimately made the final choice, and he thought Zach Wilson was going to be better than Sam Darnold. But yeah, it was a weird. If I was Saleh, I would not have answered it that way. Like I don't. He left it up for interpretation too, which I think he was very emotional from everything happening. I think he didn't really want to talk very much, but I'm curious if he gets followed up for some clarification this week. I don't think there's like, I don't think anybody needs to worry about like Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh like butting heads. Or, like there's obviously disagreements sometimes, but I think they've and I think they've mostly been in lockstep. If they say now that they haven't been, then it would be news to me. But I don't think it's worth making something of yet, but it is definitely something that's in the back of my head because that was a very weird answer.
Yeah, I thought, wow, that was a terrible way of answering that question. You kind of just stepped in poo a little bit. But that was kind of where I wrote it off as just a bad answer. But obviously people are digging in and thinking more of it. So we'll see. We'll see if people, where it goes from there. One last thing to get to. Aaron Rodgers says target date December 24th, or reports of that date. That came out before the game, I believe. Yes. And now this team is 4-6 and looks as bad as they have. Do you think Aaron Rodgers took a step back from his rehab today and is slowing things down, or do you think he's still dreaming of Christmas Eve?
I'm sure he's still going to approach it as if he's going to try because I think there's Jake Laser also report that he wanted to start practicing. I think like the day before the Falcons game or something like that was the date that they floated. I'm sure he's still going to attack it as if he wants to come back, but he has made sure to say every time he talks about this on McAfee that he wants the Jets to be in contention, and he believes they're going to be, but they have to be. It has to like matter, and so this goes. I've never believed the idea that he's actually going to play the season. I just think it's still outlandish. Like 3 months after surgery to be practicing is insane. So, and I don't have a very good feeling about this team being in contention by the time he would theoretically be back because they have the Dolphins this week. I don't think you can say any team is an easy win. The Falcons, in theory, should be a game they would win, but Falcons have some talent on offense. The Texans look great. If they play the Patriots again at the end of the year, like these are all. If they play the Dolphins one more time, they play the Browns, who have a great defense. Like that, there's no like. I don't think there's a game that's like a cupcake for them, and so. That's why I'm not. If I was predicting the rest of their schedule, like I don't know that I would predict more than 2 or 3 wins total if we're saying Rodgers isn't coming back. But it's interesting that the Rodgers stuff is still there. I'm curious what he says on Pat McAfee's show tomorrow, but I still lean towards him not playing this year.
And I mean, I think Friday, like a lost Friday, and that's it for the season. 4-7. Good look at history, but I can't imagine many teams. Back
especially with how good the AFC is this year. Like the Broncos that like can't stop winning all of a sudden. Non-Rodgers stuff. One thing we didn't hit actually was Mekhi Becton getting hurt. I feel like we should hit
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Ankle. Salah didn't have any reports today.
Yeah.
Is Dwayne Brown going to be back also? That's
a great question. The
obviously.
short week makes it interesting with Dwayne Brown. They do have to
Yeah.
activate him by Thursday or he's out for the year, Brown. So either way, they're probably going to have, I believe, their 8th offensive line unit in 11 weeks or 11 games, which is remarkable. Carter Warren played his first snaps at left tackle. Chris Glazer started at right guard. These are guys who have never played NFL snaps really before. But yeah, Mekhi, it sounds like it's not as serious as maybe they thought it would be initially. It's going to be an ankle injury. He is, as you've seen in the past, like his size makes it harder to, like, if he's off his feet, it's harder for him to come back in shape. So that is a concern, I think. But I would be surprised if he played Friday, especially on a short week. After that, we'll see. If Dwayne Brown's back, that'll help. You still have some holes on this unit, and it's a problem. But there's not really much else to say about this offensive line. It's just, I've never seen these 2 years of luck injury wise. It's just been unreal.
That's the one place where you can say, oh, it's bad luck, is the offensive line. It's incredible. Although they did draft a guy in Becton that was injury prone. Vera Tucker's the one that really hurts you, though. Like that guy getting injured twice. Crazy. All right. I think that's it for us, Zack. Any final parting thoughts on this awful game Sunday?
It was
inspirational thoughts for the listeners, whatever you want to deliver.
Keep on trucking. I don't know. I don't know. Just we're gonna try and break down everything that happened. So like we're trying to make the best out of this depressing situation that the Jets have right here. But we hope you guys will keep listening to us, like, subscribe, write some reviews, as we mentioned. I'm not sure if we're gonna have time to do one before Friday's game or not. We're still figuring that out. But at the very least, we'll get you. Maybe they have a good game on Friday, and Tim Boyle is the new Mike White, and everybody's excited again. And then
Tim effing Boyle.
Maybe that becomes a thing. TFB or TEB, Teb.
Somebody said in the chat, by the way, where are our Marissa effing done t-shirts?
We should make those. We should surprise her with those when she returns, like her first episode back. But yeah, that's all I got. We miss you, Marissa. That's my last final thought.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll catch you up again either later this week or with a recap of the Dolphins game here on the Can't Wait podcast.